Welcome to another Down the Rabbit Hole video. I'm talking about Star Frontiers again, because I love it, and I'm actually talking about something that I alluded to in my last Star Frontiers video. There is a new reboot of the game coming from TSR. It's called Star Frontiers New Genesis, and I have questions and opinions, and primarily my biggest question is the title of this video. Star Frontiers New Genesis. But why? Now, what I mean by that is, I don't understand why they're returning to Star Frontiers at all, much as I love it, and it has quite a solid fan base now. I found out about this reboot from joining a Facebook group called Star Frontiers Alive and Well. There's a fellow on there, Tom, he has his own YouTube channel called Table Top Taproom. Highly recommend you check out his stuff. I'll put a link below. Tom, aka, he goes under Gedeon357 on there. He did a really good deep dive into, they've created this new Star Frontiers that's coming out. It's called New Genesis. Here's some information. And I found it fascinating, and I really recommend you watch his entire video. I was asking him on there because some of the images, some of the pictures of the alien races that I'm going to get into, I couldn't find them anymore. So I was like, hey, Tom, where'd you get those from? He's been super gracious in giving me the pictures and the things that I would like to do in this video. So big shout out and major thanks to Tom. I can't wrap my head around why they're doing this. Now, in Tom's video, it sounds like, first of all, this is not Wizards of the Coast, who were the ones who I think inherited all of the D&D and all the other, and Star Frontiers and all the other intellectual properties from the old TSR. This is a new TSR. They have the classic logo on the paperwork, like the books that Tom shows images of. So this is a new version of TSR rebooting their old franchises, and I'm baffled as to why they're even doing it, and the way in which they're doing it is bizarre to me. Now, let me just preface all this stuff. I really enjoyed Star Frontiers in the 80s. It was, for me, not the first, but like a really compelling and charming D&D in space science fiction role-playing game from the makers of Dungeons & Dragons. They know what they're talking about. But I've talked about how, like, when I did my review of Zebulon's Guide to Frontier Space, those first Alpha Dawn rules are very rudimentary and basic. Like, they are designed with little, like, move your little tile around on the map, and you can only move so far, and then you roll your dice. Like, it was a very basic, not one that was compelling for storyline rule set. They fixed all that with Zebulon's Guide to Frontier Space, and I was so happy. I was like, yeah, now it's a real role-playing game. Volume 1 looks great. Where's Volume 2? Never happened. And I found out through Tom's videos that that was actually killed off by TSR. There was a changing of the guard mid to late 80s, I believe it was, and they were instead gonna go with the Buck Rogers in the 25th Century game, which was an odd choice, because it's like, well, I don't know that, other than the sort of Gilles Girard TV show of the early 80s, there's not a lot of love and fan appreciation for Buck Rogers back in those days. So you're axing this science fiction role-playing game that has a lot of success, it would appear, for a Buck Rogers reboot? Okay. So back in the day, TSR kind of killed off Star Frontiers, and that was sad, but, you know, that happened. But like I say, it's not like that was the only science fiction role-playing game I played back then. I actually started off with Gamma World, TSR's other big, early, you've got ray guns type of a game. It's a post-apocalyptic, you've got post-apocalyptic world with mutants and clans and monsters and all this kind of stuff. But you got laser guns and machine guns and robots and stuff. So I was already kind of aware of that element in the Dungeons and Dragons, or from TSR. So I remember playing, I was a player of Star Frontiers before I became a referee, and I remember thinking to myself, you know, there's some interesting, like, meat on the bones here, but it's kind of thin. I hope they flesh it out. And I don't know that they ever did. And it's interesting to compare it to Gamma World. Gamma World has been through multiple iterations over the years. I actually looked it up before doing this video. It's in like its 8th version now. Who keeps track of Gamma World as far as like, is it, I assume it's got a big fan base. I don't really know. I'm kind of out of the scene. But are the people who loved Gamma World from day one going through an 8th version now? Apparently one where ammunition doesn't matter. I read up online. There was some couple of highlights and bullet points about the new Gamma World series. Reboot is, it's using the old Dungeons and Dragons rules, like die and all that kind of stuff. And a lot of stuff, I guess for brevity, is not really being kept track of anymore. Like ammunition. It was just like, what's the point then? But anyway, so Gamma World has been around for a long time, and it must have some kind of a following. I mean, there was a lot of material made for it, and then that kind of faded away or went through a few rehashes and stuff like that. I remember Dark Sun came out from TSR as kind of a, well, maybe we'll channel some of that dark energy of Gamma World into a kind of still medieval swords and sorcery, but post-apocalyptic because there's no water world and all that kind of stuff. They went off in weird tangents back in the 80s, and it was like, all right, sure. But among that change of the guard and things that happened, Star Frontiers vanished, went away. And for me personally, when I was running my campaign in the earliest days, when I was doing Vulturnus, I've done a whole video about my Vulturnus campaign, my players were kind of into other science fiction role-playing games as well. One guy was huge into Traveller, and he was like, look, forget the Star Frontiers stuff. That's not very well fleshed out. Go with Traveller. There are lots of books here. They have really filled out that world. Traveller is where you want to be. I was like, well, all right, yeah, sure. And we also, one of my friends who was our big D&D DM, decided, I'm going to try Mech Warrior, which is the role-playing game attached to the Battletech board, like move your soldiers around on the battlefield. What would you call that? War game setting. And he really marveled and showed me a lot of the great stuff that the Mech Warrior role-playing game has. Like, to very briefly get into it, Mech Warrior, your mech has got hit points in different like arms and legs and torso, and if you tick off the boxes, and if they get hurt you gotta repair it, etc. Then they made basically the same thing for their characters. You would have a couple of dots in your head and your arms and your legs, and they could get blown off or whatever. And I was like, man, that is a really robust combat system. Better than the old Star Frontiers pre-Zebulon's Guide. Better than like, roll die 10 type of thing. I was like, man, I was really feeling down in the dumps because everybody was moving on to other stuff. And then there was like Steve Jackson's generic universal role-playing system, GURPS. That had a whole space campaign as well. And I was just like, man, Star Frontiers is getting left behind in the dust. Now, luckily, Zebulon's Guide came out, but I then moved to the UK, so I wasn't there for like what happened then, and I know through Tom's videos and others, they brought in Buck Rogers and kind of slit the throat of Star Frontiers and tossed it over the cliff. It's like, man, that really sucks. So that's the demise of Star Frontiers, and again, from my perspective as a player and somebody who went to the hobby store and saw the latest figurines and read the Dragon magazine, I noticed this drop in people talking Star Frontiers. It was like, okay, well, it had its time in the sun, but it's been surpassed by other better stuff. And one game that actually came out after I had left, Shadowrun, which was, again, the kind of a weird, let's take the medieval fantasy elves and dragons stuff and magic, and we'll also combine that with cybernetics and technology and a cyberpunk future. I was like, I remember looking in the hobby stores in the UK, seeing stuff for Shadowrun and thinking, oh man, it's like that Warhammer 40k stuff. It looks cool, but I've lost the connection now. I'm just gonna enjoy my memories of classic old vintage 80s Star Frontiers, and that's me good. Now, I bring up Shadowrun for a very specific reason. In finding out the stuff about the new Genesis version, Tom shows a variety of the creatures and discusses what probably is going to be the angle that new TSR is going with this new Star Frontiers. And I'm looking at what it is and I'm just like, but why? So, for example, let's talk the aliens that are going to be in the new Star Frontiers. You're going to have humans, of course. Awesome, because we're everywhere. And we're kind of the generic, and, you know, we're in every game pretty much, with a few exceptions, I'm sure. But in the artwork for them, they're looking kind of, I don't know, cybernetic implant-ish or something. Like, why is this guy got a weird hexagonal tattoo on his cheek and he's wearing a body computer, I guess, or something? Not the rugged guy with a machine gun out there fighting the Sathar that the old games always had. So, alright. Then the next image that I found from Tom was a weird cyborg guy with, like, his brain in a tube or some kind of, like, what is that? And he looks like another human. Like, is this a human that's been modified? Is this a cyberpunked human? I don't know. Alright. What else you got in the hopper there? Well, we got these big cats that are obviously, well, to me, these things look a lot like the Kilrathi from Wing Commander. And I mean, it's not like this is a new idea. They're also very much echoing the Kzinti from the Larry Niven Ringworld books and stuff. And I remember looking at this when I saw the video about new Star Frontiers, and I was just like, but why? Why are you going in a radically different direction? Not different from what we've seen in other science fiction, because this stuff it looks a little bit rehashed, to be perfectly frank. But it's very different from what Star Frontiers was all about. Where are the Ysarians? Where are the Dralicites? Where are the Vrust? What's going on here? According to Tom's interview or discussion videos that he's done, the TSR people couldn't get the license from Wizards of the Coast to fully get the Star Frontiers intellectual property, all of the stuff. So all of the aliens stay with Wizards of the Coast. They are not coming to Star Frontiers New Genesis. There will not be any Dralicites, Ysarians, Vrusks, Sathar, the Hummas, all the other things that you had in the Zebulon's Guide. And I'm just like, well, then what's the point? Why even call it Star Frontiers at that point? And apparently, it's not going to be die 10 anymore. It's going to be back to D&D style rolling of, 20-siders and 6-siders and all that kind of stuff. Maybe they won't even bother with the amazing and a fantastic gravity treatment, which I already talked about. How the decks in the ship, you're flying in one direction, then you turn the ship around and you hit the brakes. That creates your artificial gravity. I went into all that kind of stuff. The nuts and bolts of Star Frontiers were what made it so unique. There was another game that did eventually clue in and connect into that kind of stuff, but not for a long time. And Star Frontiers really, for me and my experience, was just like, wow, Traveler didn't have it, Mech Warrior didn't have it, I don't think GURPS had it. There were all these other games that were just, it's artificial gravity, and phasers and stuff. Don't think too far about it. I was like, oh, I like how Star Frontiers was really treating it scientifically plausible, and now it's not there. So maybe this new Star Frontiers New Genesis is not going to do that either. There's going to be a lot of generic stuff copied over from D&D rules, like the new Gamma World, where ammunition doesn't even account. Like, what the heck are they doing? Why are they doing this? And what is the motivation? But why? Let me just do a quick deep dive into, if you're going to make this thing under this name, why not include the original stuff that makes it unique? For example, I've got a few references to that. Kathleen Kennedy over at Lucasfilm or Disney is thinking of, for the new Indiana Jones film, number 5, Indy's going to get replaced by a woman adventurer. And I'm just like, okay, cool. Nothing wrong with that. I don't have a problem with that. But, like, then don't call it Indiana Jones. It doesn't make any sense. If you're not going to have the very thing that makes this the forefront of your intellectual property, then why are you even using the name at all? To counter-argument, I'll use some gaming examples. I remember many years ago hearing about the Atari VCS, the new rebooted Atari 2600 with all the high-def features and all that kind of stuff. And although the VCS has its problems, and I'm not a huge fan of it, One thing I will give the folks who made, the new Atari folks who actually made that thing, at least they tried to make the shape of the console look reminiscent of the 2600, and they had the classic controller, which I just thought, okay, you've got me there, because that happens to be my favorite controller, the classic Atari 2600 joystick. Love that thing. When I saw that classic controller, I'm like, all right, you're at least remembering your legacy, and you are echoing it in a modern way. I like what you're doing there. Another gaming one, and this is just as controversial, the Intellivision Amico. That's got a lot of problems, and I'm not going to go into those here, but I will say the Intellivision Classic is very famous for not having great controls, like the dial and number pad thing was always a bit strange. They're actually making sure with the Amico it has that same kind of control scheme. That could be to their detriment, but hey, at least they recognize their legacy and they're sticking with it. They're doing it right. And when I heard, okay, Star Frontiers isn't going to have Dralocytes or Sathor or Rusks or Ysarians, I was just like, but why? Why would you call it Star Frontiers anymore? It doesn't make any sense. So, I'm going to wrap this up. I really recommend you check out Tom's videos. He's done several on them. I don't know what TSR has in mind for this. I don't know why they're going in this route. I don't know why it's going to be very cyberpunk, mind control, sort of weird Shadowrun level stuff. Why are you bringing that into Star Frontiers? Why not do, I don't know, Paranoia again, if you want to do that? Anybody remember Paranoia? Why don't you recreate or refresh some of those? Why is Star Frontiers getting the complete rehash, Kathleen Kennedy getting rid of the Indiana Jones treatment here? Like, why are we being subjected to that? That's not fair. I don't like the sound of that. As it turns out, I mean, I'm just on the sidelines anyway. I don't play anymore, and I don't have a crowd to play Star Frontiers with, but I am kind of miffed. Like, why are you doing this? This doesn't make any sense, and I'll follow the story. I'm curious to hear what else happens with it, but all I can say, again, to wrap this video up, is Star Frontiers New Genesis. But why? Anyway, until next time, we'll see you down the rabbit hole.